In the chaotic world of rock and roll, fame is a double-edged sword. One moment, you're on top of the world, adored by millions. The next, you're the villain in someone else's story, starting from Johnny Rotten. Johnny Rotten, the snarling, sharp-tongued frontman of the Sex Pistols. His band didn't just change punk rock, they defined it. But Rotten wasn't content with just revolutionising music. He had to tear down anyone he thought was riding on punk's coattails. In 1996, when the Sex Pistols launched their Filthy Lucre reunion tour, Rotten went on the offensive. He accused newer punk bands of being nothing more than cheap imitators. While he didn't mention names, everyone knew who he was targeting. Green Day, the band that had brought punk to the mainstream with Dookie. Rotten sneered, calling bands like them a coat hanger with a studded leather jacket stuck on it, and dismissing their music as hollow. Billy Joe Armstrong, Green Day's frontman, didn't let it slide. In an interview, he shot back, "If it wasn't for the Sex Pistols, there may not have been Green Day. But if it wasn't for Green Day, the Sex Pistols wouldn't have had their big reunion tour." It was a mic drop moment, but Billy Joe never let the feud define him. Despite Rotten's constant jabs, calling Green Day silly rich fat kids years later, Billy Joe continued to show respect for the punk pioneer. But Johnny Rotten wasn't the only one with a grudge. Axl Rose, the volatile frontman of Guns N' Roses, was no stranger to conflict. His feud with Vince Neil from Motley Crue became one of rock's most notorious. It all started at the infamous Cat House Club in Los Angeles, where Guns N' Roses guitarist Izzy Stradlin allegedly made inappropriate advances toward Neil's wife. When she rejected him, Izzy reportedly got physical. Vince Neil wasn't about to let that slide. At the 1989 MTV Video Music Awards, Neil punched Izzy right in the face on live TV. Axl never wanted to back down, publicly challenged Neil to a fight, saying, "I'll kick your ass anytime, any place." Neil fired back with the same energy. But despite all the tough talk, the showdown never happened. Fans were left wondering what might have been while the feud simmered in the background of both their careers. Imagine growing up idolising a musician only to have them turn around and despise you. That's exactly what happened to Dan Auerbach of the Black Keys. As a young musician, Dan admired Jack White of the White Stripes, whose raw, bluesy sound inspired a generation. But Jack didn't see the Black Keys as fellow artists. He saw them as copycats. The tension reached a boiling point in 2012 when the Black Keys moved to Nashville and unknowingly booked a recording session in a studio owned by Jack White. When Jack found out, he had them kicked out. But it didn't stop there. During Jack's messy divorce, leaked emails revealed just how deep his resentment ran. He ranted about having to see Dan at their kids' school, calling him follows me around and copies me. Dan surprisingly didn't fire back. Instead, he expressed sympathy, saying, "I actually feel embarrassed for him. I don't hold grudges, man." But the feud wasn't over. In 2015, the Black Keys drummer Patrick Carney claimed Jack tried to start a fight with him at a bar. Jack denied it, and the two eventually reconciled, though deleted tweets suggest there's still bad blood beneath the surface. But sometimes feuds aren't just about professional jealousy, they're personal, bitter, and downright ugly. Anthony Kiedis of the Red Hot Chili Peppers found himself in the middle of such a feud with Mike Patton of Faith No More. In 1989, Faith No More's Epic became a massive hit, and Kiedis accused Patton of stealing his style. He joked about kidnapping Patton and cutting off his foot so he'd be forced to find his own identity. Patton didn't take the accusations seriously, but the feud escalated behind the scenes. In 1999, Mr. Bungle, Patton's side project, had their album release delayed, allegedly because Kiedis didn't want it competing with the Chili Peppers' new record. Festivals started dropping Mr. Bungle from their lineups, and it wasn't hard to guess who was behind it. No story about Rockstar feuds would be complete without Kurt Cobain, the reluctant voice of a generation. While Nirvana's raw, unfiltered sound captured the spirit of the early 90s, Kurt had no love for the glam rock scene that dominated before him, especially Guns N' Roses. For Kurt, this wasn't just a personal feud, it symbolised a battle between two eras of rock. Axl represented the excess and ego of the 80s, while Kurt embodied the raw authenticity of the 90s grunge movement. Tragically, Kurt's life ended in 1994, but the feud remains one of rock's most symbolic clashes. And finally, we can't forget about Oasis, the band that practically made feuding an art form. Brothers Liam and Noel Gallagher fought over everything, from tambourine rhythms to each other's wives. Their infamous fights were as legendary as their music. In 1994, during their first North American tour, Liam changed the lyrics mid-set to mock Noel. Noel responded by smashing Liam with a tambourine and quitting the tour. But the drama didn't stop there. Over the years, they hurled insults at each other's families, questioned each other's talent, and even fought backstage before gigs. In 2009, after one final explosive argument where Noel's guitar was smashed, he finally had enough. He announced he was quitting the band, saying, "I simply could not go on working with Liam a day longer." But despite the endless drama, fans still hold out hope. In 2025, the brothers are set to tour again. Will they finally make peace, or is this just another chapter in their never-ending saga? In the world of rock and roll, the line between love and hate is razor thin. For every adoring fan, there was a rival ready to throw a punch or fire off a scathing insult.